I first noticed something strange on a quiet Tuesday night. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. My husband, Daniel, had fallen asleep on the couch while watching television. I walked through the hallway toward our bedroom when I heard a faint sound behind me. It was like a door closing softly. I stopped and listened. Nothing. When I checked the back door, it was slightly open. I frowned and closed it. The next morning I asked Daniel about it. "Did you go outside last night?" I asked while pouring coffee. He looked confused.
No. Why?
The back door was open. Daniel chuckled and took his mug. "You probably forgot to lock it." "I'm sure I locked it," I insisted. He shrugged. "You've been working late all week. Maybe you're just tired." I nodded slowly, but something about his tone bothered me. That night, I double-checked every lock before bed. Still, when I woke up the next morning, the kitchen window was slightly open. I stared at it, feeling a small chill. When I told Daniel, he laughed again. "Claire," he said gently, "you're imagining things." I wanted to believe him, but deep down I knew I wasn't imagining anything. Over the next few days, small things kept happening. A cabinet door would be open when I knew I had closed it. The living room lamp would be on when I was certain I had turned it off. Each time I mentioned it, Daniel smiled patiently. "You're just stressed," he said. At first I tried to ignore it, but the strange feeling in my chest kept growing. One evening I came home from work and noticed the couch pillows had been moved. I always arranged them neatly before leaving. Daniel was already home when I walked in. "Did you move the pillows?" I asked. "No," he said casually while scrolling on his phone. "Are you sure?" "Yes," he replied without looking up. I stood there staring at the couch. "Maybe you forgot how you left them," Daniel said. I forced a small smile. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was tired. But that night I woke suddenly, at 2 a.m. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, careful. I held my breath and listened. Then the footsteps stopped. The house became silent again. When I checked the hallway, no one was there. The next morning, Daniel laughed softly. "You're imagining things again," he said. But my fear was growing stronger every day. The following weekend, I decided to clean the house from top to bottom. It was something I often did when I felt anxious. While vacuuming the living room, I noticed something strange near the front door. A faint muddy footprint on the tile. I froze. Daniel and I had both been home all morning. Neither of us had gone outside. I called him into the room. "Look at this," I said. He glanced at the footprint and shrugged. "It's probably old." "It's not old," I replied. "I cleaned this floor yesterday." Daniel sighed. "You're overthinking again." I stared at the mark. It was clearly fresh. "Maybe someone came in while we were out yesterday," he suggested casually. "But nothing is missing," I said. He smiled. "Exactly. So it's nothing." But his calm reaction made my stomach twist. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded louder than usual. Every shadow looked suspicious. I kept remembering Daniel's words. "You're imagining things." But the footprint was real, and someone had definitely stepped inside our house. 2 nights later, the power went out for a few minutes during a storm. Daniel and I were sitting in the living room when the lights suddenly went dark. "Great," he muttered. We waited in silence until the electricity returned. When the lights came back on, I noticed something strange. The back door was open again. I stood up immediately. "Daniel." He looked over. "What?" "The door." He frowned. "What about it?" "It's open." He stared at it for a moment. "Maybe the wind pushed it." I walked over and examined the lock. It wasn't broken, but it definitely hadn't been locked anymore. I closed it slowly. That night I lay awake thinking about everything that had happened during the past week. Open doors, moved furniture, footsteps, footprints. If someone really was entering our house, I needed proof. And I suddenly remembered something. 6 months earlier, Daniel had installed security cameras around the house after a burglary in the neighborhood. I had completely forgotten about them, but now they might finally show the truth. The next morning, Daniel left early for work. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I opened my laptop and logged into the home security system. The cameras showed the front yard, the driveway, the backyard, and the hallway near the back door. I started reviewing the recordings from the past week. At first, everything looked normal. Cars passing, trees moving in the wind, our dog sleeping on the porch. But when I checked the hallway camera from 2 nights earlier, my heart began to pound. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the back door slowly opened. I leaned closer to the screen. A figure stepped inside. The person wore a dark jacket and a hat pulled low over their face. They moved quietly through the hallway and disappeared toward the living room. I felt cold all over. Someone had definitely entered our house. But then something even stranger happened. 2 minutes later, Daniel appeared on the screen. He walked calmly down the hallway and locked the back door. I replayed the footage again and again. Each time my confusion grew stronger. The unknown person entered the house. Then Daniel appeared shortly after. But the strange part was how calm he looked. There was no sign of surprise. No fear. He simply walked to the door and locked it, as if he already knew someone had been inside. My mind raced with questions. Did Daniel hear the person? Did he chase them away? Or was something else happening? When Daniel came home that evening, I tried to watch him carefully. He greeted me with his usual smile. "How was work?" he asked. "Fine," I said. I wanted to ask him about the camera footage right away, but something told me to wait. Instead, I asked casually, "Did you wake up during the night 2 days ago?" Daniel shook his head.
No.
"Why?" "I thought I heard someone walking in the hallway." He sighed. "Claire, you really need to relax." Then he kissed my forehead. "You're imagining things again." But now I knew one thing for certain. I was not imagining anything. The next morning, I watched the security footage again, this time from earlier days. At first, I saw nothing unusual. But when I checked recordings from 4 nights earlier, the same thing happened. At 2:10 a.m., the back door opened. The same dark figure stepped inside. Again, they moved quietly through the hallway. And again, 2 minutes later, Daniel appeared and locked the door. My chest felt tight. Why would Daniel lock the door after someone entered the house? And why did this happen more than once? I spent hours reviewing the recordings. The pattern repeated 3 different nights. Always after midnight. Always the same person. Always Daniel appearing afterward. By the time Daniel returned home that evening, my mind was spinning with possibilities. Maybe Daniel knew the person. Maybe he was helping them. Or maybe there was an explanation I hadn't considered yet. But one thing was certain. Daniel had lied when he said nothing strange was happening. And I needed to know why. That night I pretended everything was normal. Daniel cooked dinner while I watched him quietly from across the kitchen. "Something wrong?" he asked suddenly. "No," I replied quickly. "You seem quiet, just tired." He nodded and continued chopping vegetables. Later we sat on the couch watching television. Around midnight, Daniel stood up. "I'm going to bed," he said. "Okay." But instead of sleeping, I waited. At 2 a.m., I heard movement in the hallway. My heart began racing. I slipped out of bed and crept toward the door. The hallway was dark, but I could see a shadow moving near the back entrance. Someone was inside the house again. I stayed hidden and watched. The figure walked quietly toward the living room. Then, exactly like the recording showed, Daniel appeared a moment later. He locked the door calmly. Then he turned around. And for a brief second, the hallway light illuminated his face. He was smiling. I stepped back into the bedroom before Daniel could see me. My mind was spinning. Why would he smile? Was he expecting the person? Was this all planned? I lay in bed pretending to sleep as Daniel returned. He slid under the blankets quietly. Within minutes, his breathing slowed. But I stayed awake the rest of the night. The next morning, Daniel left for work like usual. As soon as he was gone, I opened the security recordings from the night before. This time I watched carefully. When the stranger entered the house, they removed their hat for a moment. The camera captured their face briefly. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart nearly stopped. I recognized her immediately. It was Olivia, Daniel's coworker. I had met her twice at company events. And now she was secretly entering our house in the middle of the night. The discovery left me shaking. Olivia had been inside our home multiple times. Late at night, while Daniel pretended nothing was happening, I reviewed the recordings again. Each visit lasted about 20 minutes. She walked into the living room. Then the hallway camera stopped showing her. That meant she was somewhere deeper inside the house. Possibly our bedroom. The thought made my stomach twist. When Daniel returned home that evening, I forced myself to stay calm. "How was work?" he asked.
Fine, I said.
I studied his face carefully. Did he know I had seen the footage? If he did, he gave no sign. Instead, he talked about meetings and deadlines. Normal conversation. Normal behavior. But everything about him suddenly felt fake. After dinner, he went upstairs early. I stayed in the living room staring at the blank television screen. Now, the truth was clear. Daniel hadn't been dismissing my concerns by accident. He had been hiding something all along. I didn't confront Daniel right away. Instead, I decided to gather more evidence. The next evening, I adjusted the hallway camera slightly so it would show more of the living room doorway. If Olivia entered again, I wanted to see exactly where she went. 2 nights later, the pattern repeated. At 2:12 a.m., the back door opened. Olivia stepped inside quietly. She walked straight toward the living room. The camera caught a glimpse of Daniel already waiting there. My heart pounded as I watched them hug. Then they disappeared into the room together. 20 minutes later, Olivia left the house again. Daniel locked the door behind her. The truth was undeniable now. Daniel had been secretly meeting Olivia in our house while I slept. The cameras had captured everything. For days, Daniel had insisted I was imagining things. But the footage told the real story. And now I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The following morning, I made a plan. Instead of confronting Daniel immediately, I copied all the security recordings onto a flash drive. Every clip, every night, every moment showing Olivia entering our home. Then I saved backup copies in cloud storage. If Daniel tried to delete the footage later, it wouldn't matter. That evening, he came home smiling. "You seem happier today," he said. "I am," I replied. He didn't realize the reason. After dinner, he suggested we invite a few friends over for the weekend. "That sounds fun," I said calmly. In reality, the gathering would become something very different. I already knew who I wanted to invite, and I knew exactly what I planned to show them. Saturday evening, our house filled with guests. Friends from Daniel's workplace, neighbors, and Olivia. She arrived smiling, pretending nothing was unusual. Daniel looked relaxed all evening. He laughed, poured drinks, and acted like the perfect host. But I noticed the small glances he exchanged with Olivia when he thought no one was watching. Around 9 o'clock, I stood up and tapped a glass gently. "I'd like to show everyone something interesting," I said. Daniel looked confused. "What is it?" he asked. "You'll see." I connected my laptop to the living room television. The security camera footage appeared on the screen. At first, people looked puzzled. Then the video showed the back door opening at 2:12 a.m. Olivia entering the house. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's face turned white. And the footage was only beginning. The room went silent as the footage played. No one spoke. No one moved. On the screen, Olivia stepped fully into our home, her face clear under the hallway light. The timestamp glowed in the corner like a witness that could not lie. A soft gasp came from one of Daniel's coworkers. Then the next clip played. And the next. Different nights. Same pattern. Same secret. Same betrayal. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was speaking for me. Daniel stood frozen near the kitchen counter, his glass still in his hand. For a moment, he looked like he might laugh it off, like he always did. But this time, there was no room for denial. "Claire," he began. I raised my hand gently. "Don't," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried through the room. Then I looked at Olivia. She couldn't meet my eyes anymore. What part was I imagining? I asked quietly. No one answered, because now everyone could see. Daniel finally stepped forward. It's not what it looks like, he said quickly. A few people shifted uncomfortably. I tilted my head slightly. Then explain it, I said. He opened his mouth, then paused. Because how do you explain something that has already been seen? Olivia spoke next, her voice trembling. We didn't mean for this to happen like this. A soft murmur spread through the room. Like what? I asked, repeatedly entering my home in the middle of the night. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. We were going to tell you.
When?
After how many more nights? After how many more lies? You told me I was imagining things, I said.
He looked down.
I was trying to protect you. That made something inside me go still. Protect me? From the truth? Or from losing control? The footage kept playing. Now it showed something new. From the adjusted angle, everyone could see into part of the living room. Daniel was already there before Olivia entered. Waiting.
Prepared.
Comfortable. The moment she walked in, he stepped forward and pulled her into a hug.
Not awkward.
Not hesitant. Familiar. Intimate. The room reacted instantly. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another person turned away. The illusion of Daniel, the calm, reasonable husband, was breaking apart piece by piece. I watched him instead of the screen. His shoulders tightened. His jaw clenched. But he still didn't apologize. Not once. Olivia finally stepped back. I didn't know he was telling you that, she said quietly. The room shifted again. I turned to her slowly. You didn't know he was calling me unstable? I asked. Her silence answered for her. Daniel looked at her sharply. Don't do this, he muttered. But it was already happening. Truth doesn't stop once it starts. What did you think was happening? I continued. That I invited you in? That I knew. Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't soften. Because this wasn't confusion. This was choice. Then something unexpected happened. One of Daniel's coworkers, a man named Elias, stepped forward. I need to say something, he said quietly. Everyone turned toward him. He looked at Daniel, then at me. I've seen them together at work, he admitted. Late nights. Closed doors. The room went still again. Daniel's expression darkened. You're exaggerating, he snapped. Elias shook his head.
No.
I stayed quiet because I thought it wasn't my place. Then he added something that changed everything. But I didn't know you were being lied to like this. Another voice spoke up. This time, it was Marina, one of Olivia's closest friends. I asked her about it, she said slowly. Olivia's head snapped up. Marina? But she continued. You told me he was separating from his wife. The room erupted into whispers. I felt something settle deep inside me. Not anger, not shock, just clarity. I looked at Daniel. Were you? I asked. He didn't answer. Because now, every version of his story was colliding. The rest of the night didn't end loudly. It ended quietly. People began to leave.
Slowly.
Uncomfortably. No one wanted to stay in a space where truth had stripped everything bare. Olivia left without looking at anyone. Daniel tried to follow her. I stopped him. Stay, I said. He hesitated, then turned back. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. When the door finally closed behind the last guest, the house felt different. Empty, but honest. Daniel stood across from me, searching for words. You humiliated me, he said. I almost laughed. I showed the truth, I replied. That's not the same thing. He shook his head. You could have handled this privately. Like you handled your secret? I asked. That stopped him. Days passed after that night. Daniel tried to talk, to explain, to minimize. But every conversation circled back to the same thing. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. And that difference changed everything. Meanwhile, something else began to unfold. Elias reached out to me. I should have said something sooner, he said. I studied him carefully. Why didn't you? I asked.
He sighed.
Because I thought it was just another office situation. Then he added quietly, but this was different. His honesty felt strange after everything I had experienced. Real. Unfiltered. Marina contacted me too. Not to defend Olivia, but to apologize. I didn't know the full truth, she said. I believed her. Because unlike Daniel, she wasn't trying to rewrite anything. Olivia eventually sent me a message.
Short.
Simple. I'm sorry. I believed him. I read it once, then closed it. Because some apologies don't repair anything. They just confirm what already happened. Weeks later, I met Elias for coffee. Not because I was ready for anything new, but because I wanted something real. We talked for hours. No secrets. No performance. Just truth. And for the first time in a long while, I felt calm. Daniel, on the other hand, began to lose control of everything he had tried to protect. At work, rumors spread quickly. Elias wasn't the only one who had noticed things. More voices came forward. More stories surfaced. And Daniel's carefully built image began to crack. He came to see me one last time. "You're really walking away?" he asked. I looked at him steadily. Yes. He searched my face. "For good." I nodded. "For truth," I said. And this time, I meant it. Months later, life felt different. Not perfect, but honest. Elias remained in my life, not as a replacement, but as something new. Something that didn't begin with lies. Something that didn't need to hide. Looking back, I realized something important. The scariest part wasn't the stranger entering my house. It wasn't the footsteps or the open doors. It was being told I was imagining things. Because doubt is more dangerous than truth. But truth always finds a way to be seen. And when it does, it doesn't just expose betrayal. It shows you exactly who is real and who never was. 3 months after everything fell apart, I thought the worst was behind me. I had rebuilt my routine piece by piece. Work felt steady again. The house, my house now, was quieter, but no longer unsettling. The locks had been changed. The security system upgraded. I even installed additional cameras inside just in case.
Control.
That's what I needed. And for a while it worked. Until Thursday night. I was reviewing some old files on my laptop when a notification popped up from the security system. Motion detected. Hallway camera, 2:13 a.m., previous night. My heart skipped. Previous night? That didn't make sense. I had slept through the night. No alerts. No sounds. Nothing unusual. Frowning, I clicked the notification. The footage loaded slowly. The hallway appeared. Still. Empty. Timestamp. 2:13 a.m. Then, movement. My breath caught. The back door opened. But this time it wasn't Olivia. The figure stepped inside, taller, broader, moving with confidence. No hesitation. No secrecy. As if they belonged there. I leaned closer to the screen. The camera angle caught part of their face as they turned. And my blood ran cold. It wasn't a stranger. It was Daniel. I replayed the footage at least 10 times. Each time hoping I was wrong. Each time confirming I wasn't. Daniel. Inside my house. At 2:13 a.m. Days after we had finalized everything legally. Days after he had handed over his keys. Days after he told me, "I won't come back." Yet there he was. Walking through the hallway like nothing had changed. No forced entry. No hesitation. He moved straight toward the living room, the same path Olivia used to take. My chest tightened.
How?
I had changed the locks.
Personally.
Watched the locksmith do it. There was no way Daniel should have had access anymore. Unless a thought formed slowly.
Carefully.
Unsettlingly. He never needed a key. I opened another file. Checked the backyard camera. 2:12 a.m. Daniel approached the back door. But instead of unlocking it, he reached beneath the wooden frame.
Paused.
Then pulled something out. My stomach dropped. A spare key.
Hidden.
Somewhere I had never known. I felt a wave of anger rise. But beneath it, something else.
Fear.
Because this wasn't about Olivia anymore. This wasn't about an affair. This was about control, access, planning, and the realization that Daniel had been entering the house long before I ever noticed.
I didn't call the police.
Not yet. Instead, I waited, not passively.
Carefully.
That night, I stayed awake. Every light in the house off. Every camera active. And something new. I locked my bedroom door. At 2:10 a.m., I heard it. The soft shift of the back door. Exactly like before. Exactly like always. But this time, I was ready. I moved silently toward the hallway, stopping just before the corner. Listening. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Not sneaking. Not rushing. Familiar. I peeked. Daniel stood there. In the dim light. Looking relaxed. Comfortable. Like this was routine. Like this was still his house. My pulse pounded in my ears. But I didn't step out. Not yet. Instead, I watched. He walked into the living room, sat down, and did something that made my skin crawl. He picked up the remote, turned on the TV, and leaned back like he used to, like nothing had changed, like I wasn't even there. Something inside me shifted then. This wasn't just intrusion. This was something deeper, something obsessive. And I realized, if I confronted him now, I'd lose control of the situation. So instead, I stepped back, quietly, and made a different plan. The next morning, I called Elias. Not as a friend, not casually, but because I needed someone who could think clearly. When I showed him the footage, his expression hardened immediately. "He's been coming back," he asked. I nodded. More than once. Elias leaned back, processing. "This isn't about the affair anymore," he said. "I know. This is fixation." The word hung in the air. Uncomfortable. Accurate. "He still thinks this is his space," Elias continued. "Or worse, he thinks you'll eventually accept it." I shook my head.
No.
"Good," he said firmly. "Because this needs to be handled carefully." We discussed options.
Police.
Restraining orders. Confrontation. But none of them felt immediate enough. Not with how calmly Daniel had been acting. Not with how easily he had accessed the house. Then Elias asked something unexpected. Did he ever act like this before? I paused. Thinking back. The way Daniel dismissed my concerns. The way he controlled the narrative. The way he made me doubt myself. And suddenly, it clicked. This wasn't new behavior. It had just never been this visible before. That night I ended it. Not with fear. Not with hesitation. But with certainty. At 2:11 a.m., the alert came again. Motion detected. I stood in the hallway this time. Lights on. Waiting. The back door opened. Daniel stepped inside. And froze. Because this time, I was standing there. Watching him. No hiding. No confusion. No doubt. "Claire," he said slowly. Like he hadn't expected reality to meet him. "You need to leave," I said calmly. He blinked. Then smiled faintly. "You're overreacting." The words hit differently now. Not confusing. Not powerful. Just empty. "You've been entering my house without permission," I said. "After everything." "This is still my home too," he replied. "No," I said firmly. "It isn't." Something in my tone must have reached him, because for the first time, his expression shifted. "You're serious," he said. I always was. Silence stretched between us. Then I stepped aside slightly. Not in surrender, but in clarity. "I've already called the police." That broke it. The illusion, the control, everything he thought he still had. And, for the first time since all of this began, Daniel looked exactly what he was. Not calm, not in control, but caught. The moment I said I had called the police, something in Daniel snapped, but not in the way I expected. He didn't panic,
But laughed.
softly at first, then louder. "You really think they're going to do anything?" he said, shaking his head. "Claire, you're still overreacting." But I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching him the same way he had watched me all those nights, calm, steady, unmoved. That's when the shift happened, because for the first time he realized something had changed. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. The distant sound of sirens cut through the silence. Faint at first, then closer. Daniel's smile faded. You actually called them, he said. Yes.
His jaw tightened.
His eyes flicked toward the door, calculating. Don't, I said quietly. It wasn't a threat.
It was a statement.
And somehow he understood. Minutes later, red and blue lights filled the windows. 2 officers entered, their presence instantly altering the atmosphere. What's going on here? One of them asked. I spoke clearly. He's been entering my home without permission. Repeatedly. Daniel tried to interrupt, but the officer raised a hand. Sir, we'll hear from you in a moment. For once, Daniel wasn't in control of the conversation. And it showed. The police took statements separately. I sat in the kitchen, recounting everything while Daniel stood outside with the second officer. I could see him through the window, talking, gesturing, trying to explain his version, trying to reshape reality. But something was different now, because this time there was evidence. When I showed the officers the recordings, their expressions shifted from neutral to serious. This has been happening multiple times? One asked. Yes. And you have copies of all of this? I do. They nodded. Then one of them stepped outside again. The conversation with Daniel changed immediately. His posture stiffened. His tone sharpened. Even from inside, I could tell. He wasn't convincing them. After about 15 minutes, the officers came back in. Ma'am, we're going to ask him to leave the property, one said. And if he comes back? Then it escalates. That word lingered. Escalates. Because this wasn't over.
Not yet.
Daniel didn't go quietly. Not completely. As the officers escorted him out, he turned back once, just once, and looked at me. Not angry. Not ashamed. Something else. Something colder. You're making a mistake, he said. I didn't respond. Because I had spent too long believing his version of reality. And I wasn't going back. The door closed behind him. And for the first time in months, the house felt truly mine. But peace didn't come immediately. Because even though Daniel was gone, the weight of what had happened remained. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, but awareness. Every sound, every shadow, every shift in the air. But nothing happened. No doors opened. No footsteps echoed. No presence lingered. Just silence. Real silence. And somehow that felt louder than anything before. The next step came quickly. A formal report. Then a legal consultation. Within days, I filed for a restraining order. Not out of impulse, but necessity. The footage made the process straightforward. Repeated, unauthorized entry. Clear evidence. Established pattern. But what surprised me wasn't the legal side. It was what surfaced alongside it. The lawyer looked at me carefully after reviewing everything. Has he ever tried to make you question your memory before this? She asked. I paused, then nodded slowly. Frequently. She leaned back. That's not just manipulation, she said. That's a pattern of control. The word settled heavily. Control. Because suddenly everything made more sense. Not just the break-ins, but the dismissal, the calm lies, the way he had made me doubt what I knew to be true. It hadn't started recently. It had just escalated. Elias stayed close through it all. Not in a way that felt intrusive, but steady, reliable. He helped install additional security, checked in without pressure. And most importantly, he never tried to tell me what I was feeling. One evening, we sat in the living room, the same room where everything had unraveled. You're handling this better than most people would, he said. I shook my head slightly. I'm just seeing things clearly now. He nodded. That's the difference. Clarity. It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about revenge. It was about finally seeing reality without distortion. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The restraining order was approved faster than expected. Temporary at first, but immediate. Daniel was legally prohibited from coming near the house. Or me. When he was served, his response came in the form of a message. Short. Sharp. You've gone too far. I stared at it for a long moment, then deleted it. No reply. No engagement. No reopening of doors, literal or otherwise. Because this time, I wasn't going to be pulled back into his version of control. Weeks passed, quietly,
Stably.
until something unexpected happened. The police contacted me again. "We need you to come in," the officer said. My stomach tightened. Why? There have been additional reports. At the station, they showed me something I hadn't anticipated. Another complaint. Another woman. Similar pattern. Late-night presence. Unexplained access. Dismissed concerns. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just me. Her name was Lila. We met a few days later. And within minutes, the similarities were undeniable. "He always made it seem like I was overthinking," she said. I nodded slowly. Same. He had keys I didn't know about. Same. He'd show up places unannounced. I felt a chill, because suddenly, this wasn't just personal. It was behavioral, a pattern that extended beyond one relationship. And that realization changed everything. The final hearing approached. This time, it wouldn't be temporary. It would decide everything. Daniel appeared different in court. Controlled.
Composed.
Careful. But the evidence spoke louder than any version of himself he tried to present. Footage. Reports. Patterns. And when Lila stepped forward to testify, the last piece fell into place. Because now, it wasn't one story.
It was a pattern.
And patterns are harder to deny. The ruling was clear. The restraining order became permanent. Daniel lost any legal claim to the house. And, more importantly, he lost access. Not just physically, but completely. As I walked out of the courthouse, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. And that was enough. Some people think the scariest part of a story like this is the betrayal. Or the lies. But it's not. The scariest part is when someone convinces you not to trust yourself. When they make you question what you see. Because once doubt takes hold, it becomes easier to control everything else. But the moment you take that trust back, everything changes permanently.